If you're actively seeking ways to build your mental toughness, navigate life transitions with grace, or simply find inspiration to keep moving forward, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Beautiful Thinking. I am Kat and this is my co-host Yvette.
Hello.
And today we are talking about giving too much and setting boundaries and what you can do to stop yourself from doing that.
We are.
Wow.
The fun and games. So what do we mean by that? What do we mean by giving too much? And I think that really comes back to when we're in relationships and we are actually giving our all in that relationship. We may not be getting a lot back in return, or we're kind of losing our identity in it as well.
Yeah.
Being a bit of a people pleaser, that could be the other element of it.
Mm.
And how do you pick up on those signs and realize that that's actually not healthy?
It's a good question. And it's something that I think, everyone has to some extent, don't they? We all have people in our lives that we feel that we can't escape, whether they be family, friends, co-workers. And it's extremely difficult to navigate this space. And we can get into patterns, I think, of behavior with people. You know, they might overstep our boundaries and press us a lot and have really high expectations from us. And if we become that person that just gives too much, I think one of the signs of that is you're just constantly feeling drained, exhausted, and like you've poured your cup out and there's nothing coming back for you.
So true. And I think then you can also have the element of people taking advantage of you in that situation too, when you'll start attracting to you people who keep wanting and not giving because you are the giver. You know, you're always giving.
Yeah.
And then they take, you could be in a good relationship, like a really good relationship, but that person's gotten so used to you being the giver.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that they are purposely taking advantage of you. They just expect you to do things because you've always done it.
Because you've always done it.
Yeah. And then within yourself, you can get to a point where you go, oh, gosh, I'm always the one doing stuff. And then you get angry about it and you take it out on them and they're like, what are you getting angry about? You know, you've always done this. Why all of a sudden you're getting angry? And so you've got to be really mindful of how you're going into a relationship, any relationship, whether it's a friendship or whether it's a, life partner. It's the whole is, what are you giving in that relationship? And if you are giving too much, are you actually setting yourself up for down the track of starting to resent that relationship because you feel as if you're giving it way too much and not getting enough back in return? But you've done it.
Yeah.
What's the reason why you've done it in the first place?
That's another good question, because I think it's always way more difficult to redraw the boundaries later on when you're saying things like, when you start realizing that you are giving too much and that you're exhausted and it's become a bit of a one-way street. I think it's a lot more difficult to say, actually, I'm not happy with how things are going and we're going to have to readjust the boundaries here, because people can react very angrily from that and go, whoa, hang on a second. You're completely redrawing the lines of our relationship. What's going on?
Yeah, and I've never known you to be like that. I've always known you to be like this. And what you've actually done is you've not really been your true self with them. You've always pretended to be a pleaser and a giver.
Or maybe you're on a journey to discovering your true self, and now you've suddenly decided. And I think this is really common when you're going through self-growth. You start looking and evaluating and saying, well, I actually feel really drained. You know, what is it that's happening? And then if you're going through that journey, you can say to yourself, oh, okay, I want to keep this person in my life, but I need to redraw the boundary lines and we need to have that conversation. And that person has got absolutely no idea what work you've done on yourself or what crossroads you're at in your life, why you want to make these changes. And that can be a really difficult conversation.
Well, it can be. I mean, I look at that and kind of go, if it's a healthy relationship to start off with, even if you've still been a giver, but it's still a pretty healthy relationship, you should be able to have that conversation with them without any problem. And they'll be understanding of it because they'll also probably know that you have been giving a lot. And that's part of, it's part of your people pleasing trait. And so they'll be like, they should be able to support you with it.
Yes.
But if it's actually a sort of like a toxic relationship or an unhealthy relationship, it's actually going to be a very difficult conversation because that person will look at you and go, what do you mean you're not going to do this anymore? You've always done this.
and you may end up getting gaslighted by that person.
Yeah.
That's extremely common. If you're in a relationship of any kind with someone who's what we, a taker, whether they know that they are or not, because some people have never stopped to examine themselves and be self-aware enough to go, actually, I'm a bit of a taker. I steamroll over the top of people's boundaries and I expect them to conform to my needs.
Yeah.
And people like that will often simply be accepted, because I hear a lot of people saying things like, that's just how they are, we've just got to put up with them, those kinds of conversations. And if
Mm.
you then say to that person, oh, you know what, I'm actually really uncomfortable with this and I don't like it. I actually had this conversation with my ex-father-in-law who smacked my daughter. And I rang him and I said, you don't have permission to smack my children, and I will not tolerate you smacking my children. So don't do it.
Setting a really clear boundary.
And he said,
Yeah.
this was his toxic response: I've forgotten more about raising children than you'll ever know.
I've forgotten about raising
I've
oh, wow.
forgotten more about raising children than you'll ever know.
That's a weird response. Okay.
And I said, well, the next time you hit my kid, I'll call the cops. So I don't give a shit how much you
Yeah.
know. So don't hit
Yeah.
my kid. And he went,
Yeah.
all right then."
But again, that's just clearly setting a nice, a good boundary very upfront. If you allow that type of behavior to continue, though, that person then thinks that, well, this is okay, and they'll continue doing it.
Yeah.
Which is
Well,
why
yeah.
it's so important that even as a people pleaser or someone who's a giver,
Mm,
um, that, when you feel that you're being taken advantage of, you need to step up and set that boundary and let them know that, yeah, I'm happy to do things, but I'm not happy to be taken advantage of. Um,
yeah.
and really be clear on that, because I think a lot of the times when we are givers or people pleasers, we totally forget about what is good for us, and we're only thinking about what's good for the other person, and
Yeah.
you're pretty much putting yourself behind everybody else. So if you're in a family, say of 5
Mm,
people,
yeah.
and you are the mother, let's say you're the mother, because it's quite typical that usually it's a woman thing that this happens around,
Yep.
and you are a mother, you'll find that you after your husband and after your 3 kids, then you put yourself, and you'll
Yes,
consider
I've been
yourself.
guilty of that in the past.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's actually, but believe it or not, and this is a message that society gives us, isn't it? Good mothers, just become mothers. That's your
Yeah.
entire identity and that's what you do. And interestingly, that is actually really counterintuitive to what makes a happy family. Because what actually makes a happy family is when a mother is feeling content and balanced and heard and valued, and the father is feeling the same way. And then the children observe their parents engaging in good self-care and good self-awareness, and then they learn those habits by osmosis.
Yeah. So if you think, probably go back to the time when we had more of a community set up within society,
Yep.
perhaps in smaller villages or even with tribes people, etc. There's a sense of community,
Yep.
and the women were always not just considered to be, well, you are raising the children of that. They were also considered to be the voice of wisdom.
Yeah.
So if you are too much in the sense of pleasing other people, where is
Yeah.
that voice of wisdom? Where's that
Yeah.
coming?
Yeah. It
And it's
just it
not,
just
it's
gets
being
squashed.
squashed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in those village setups, you also had like aunties whose kids were older, or even older kids. You had grandparents available and around, and everyone would get together and look after the kids. And so the mothers weren't in the home, stuck at home with 2 kids whilst the other parent is out, whatever the setup looks like, constantly dealing with loneliness, nothing but repetitive housework, like that real 1950s nuclear family sort of thing. That's
Yeah,
super, super isolating and very unhealthy. And then,
it
you
is.
know, then there's the whole, right. I can remember reading this really interesting excerpt from a book. And it did the rounds on social media a bit, make sure that when the father comes home from work, the children are nicely washed and they look good and fresh and in nice clean pajamas ready for bed. Put them to bed quietly, make sure you've got a drink and make sure that you've got some fresh lipstick on and you look nice. talk in a nice quiet voice and bring him his
and
dinner.
have his slippers ready for him when as soon as he walks in and his meal prepared for him. Yes, that new family setup. And the interesting thing is there was a high use of Valium going on during that period of time for housewives. It's how they were coping with it.
Can you blame them?
They were basically taking Valium to, control their depression.
Yeah, how
Because they
awful.
were numbing themselves because they were so depressed, because if that's
Yeah,
all they're doing, I mean, some women are able, there are some people that is what they feel that they're here to do, is to,
yeah.
provide for and raise children and be a great mother and things like that. But in that, they're not just being a people pleaser, and they're not just giving.
Yeah,
They are actually actively educating their children. They're being
yeah,
a, you could say, a real good mother role model. And so when you look at, if you're just giving, what sort
mm.
of a role model are you being to your children, but
Well,
also
yeah.
to people in your life, when all you're doing is becoming a shadow of other people?
You perpetuate that damaging stereotype, which is that, the woman or, I mean, it's not always necessarily the woman. Just if you're a giver,
Okay. Yeah,
you've
it
got to,
just happens to be
yeah, it's very, very
quite
common in
typical to
mothers. But
be
yeah,
a female. Yeah.
if you're always giving and you're always giving and you're always pouring yourself out on people, I mean, it means that you're a kind, and that's the other thing.
Hmm.
It's almost performative. I think we've touched on this so many times. It's, if I love these people hard enough, they'll value me just as much as I value them, and then I'll get back from them what I'm giving to them. And ideally, I suppose a reciprocal relationship where you both acknowledge each other and give backwards and forwards would be lovely. Just if that's not happening, then you need to maybe ask the question and say, why am I doing this?
Well, yes, and if it is happening because you're looking for that external validation, then that comes back to that feeling of, which we all suffer from in different elements, but it's just showing itself in this facet,
Yeah.
is I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't deserve to be as loved as I am loving, which is,
Yeah. And I don't deserve to be appreciated. I don't deserve to be respected. I
yeah,
just have to give. And in the giving, how people take that is is how I'm taking love.
yeah,
So, I'm giving it all. So therefore, and
yeah,
because I'm providing all of the love, therefore that's how they feel towards me. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes individuals are just taking advantage of it. Um,
yeah, that's right. And I mean, you can be stuck in and family systems play out too, don't they? So it's very difficult. I mean, you and I know, you can be in a very unhealthy family dynamic that you're raised in, and you can have, say, for example, a really difficult parent who just constantly takes from you and is constantly expecting you to, they'll say jump and you'll have to say how high, and you've got to, and I mean, I'm thinking of my own father when I talk about this. So to have a relationship with my father, I've got to always be shutting my mouth, rolling my eyes quietly, just not saying anything, allowing him to spout his absolute rubbish and not challenge him at all in any way, even though a lot of the time what he's saying is really ridiculous and has no logic whatsoever. But and so I find having a relationship with him really, really difficult, and I've kind of given it the flick in the end because I got to the stage where I couldn't do it. It was just too hard. But I think having a relationship with people who are very difficult in your life that you are stuck with or whatever it is because they are part of your life, drawing boundaries, I think you've got to say to yourself, well, how damaging is this relationship to me ultimately? Can I step back a little bit and just have a less engaged relationship with them that I can manage? Is that okay to do? Or does this person treat me like I'm 2 years of age, constantly undermine and invalidate me to the point where it's giving me mental health issues?
yeah.
And in that instance, I think it's fair to say, well, I'm going to choose me over
Yes.
the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's not selfish, do you reckon, Eva? Because I
I don't
think
think it's selfish at all.
a
No.
lot of us think that, don't we? What
Yeah.
do you think of that?
I don't think it's selfish. I think it's again, it's very healthy to set boundaries, but I also think it's very healthy to have self-respect and self-appreciation. And when you are looking at a relationship and that person makes you feel really uncomfortable,
Mm,
like say with your father,
mm,
as you were saying, you couldn't talk to him, so you were probably walking on eggshells around him. And
Mm.
that makes you not being able to express yourself. You can't be you. You have
No.
to pretend to be somebody else, or you've just got to shut up and not say anything. And then that makes the whole um, connection really uncomfortable. Yeah.
Mm.
And I
Yep.
suspect that when you moved out of home and whenever you were going over there to visit him or he was coming to visit you, you would get uncomfortable about the thought of interacting with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's difficult when it's your parent, and I think this is extremely common of people in our generation because you are told you must respect and love your parents, and you do love your parents. You love them like you don't love anyone else. That's totally normal. But then as you grow, you start understanding, okay, some of the things that they do are actually really damaging to me, and they
Yeah.
continue, if they grow with that. So my mum did some really dumb stuff when she was young because she didn't know any better. But as her knowledge has grown, she has had conversations with me around it and gone, you know what? And she's not perfect. None of us are. I know I've done the wrong thing there. I'm sorry about that. So you can forgive and move forwards.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she has done a lot of work on herself around that, which has been very helpful. But when they just stubbornly go, no, 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 you're the problem, not me, or make up lies, that's another thing too that I really that you have no power over. You can't stop that stuff. So then that's when, I think that you just need to step to say, I choose myself. I choose
Yeah.
myself.
And and I think it's that, as I said, if you feel any form of being uncomfortable or nervous, and not a
Yeah.
good nervous, but a bad nervous, then you're, that's your whole internal system telling you that this is not a good relationship.
Yeah.
And you do need to set boundaries within that.
Yeah.
And I think,
Absolutely.
it goes back to um, the reason why I don't consider it to be selfish is I always imagine that, when they're doing the safety call on the airplanes, when you first sit down and they say, okay, this is, these are the lights, etc. But when they talk about the oxygen mask dropping
Oh
down, they
yeah,
never
yeah.
say put the oxygen mask on the person first next to you. They say put
Yep.
it on yourself first and then
Mm,
put it on
mm.
the person next to you. Because if you put it on them first and you run out of breath, and in fact, you don't get an opportunity to put it on them, well, you're both dead,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
right.
it's
Mm,
really important to look after yourself because no one else is going to do that for you.
that's
No one's
right.
going to look after you as well as you look after yourself.
That's right.
And if you don't start setting healthy boundaries or treating yourself with respect,
Yep.
well, the thing about it is you're telling other people
You can
that it's
shit on me from
okay
a great height.
to treat you in a negative way as well because you don't yourself treat yourself with
Yeah.
respect. So
I've
I
learned
think it's
that the hard
really
way.
helpful to
I've
do
learned
it.
that the hard way, being too kind to people that I can see are not. And sometimes we do this whole, I can see this person's not responding. You know what? I'm going to take the high road and I'm going to continue being kind and then we'll see what happens then. But then some people just think that you're a mug.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Some of the conversations or some of those relationships it'll be really hard to have that conversation
Yeah.
because of that reason that you've been that people pleaser or that giver for such a long time. And if
Mm,
that person has also taken advantage of that, they're not going to want you to set boundaries. They're
no,
going to want you to stay the way that you've been so they can keep getting what they want out of it.
that's right.
However, as I said, if it's a healthy relationship, they'll be willing to go, yeah, I want to see you grow because I also do believe that you give too much. And I think you need
Yes.
to start giving to yourself more. And
Or
that bit,
even better, they'll
yeah,
raise it with you first.
yeah, yeah,
Because I've actually experienced that. I remember coming home one day from doing something and it was starting to rain and the line was full of washing and I thought, "Oh my god, I've got to drive home. That would have been dry. I've got to go home and grab it all off the line quick. Am I going to beat the rain?" You have one of those things. So it's such a small, silly little thing, but the message I got out of it was huge. I raced home and this is when Joe and I had first started, like we'd been together a while, but I was racing home and the washing line was empty. As I drove in, I was like, "Oh my god, what happened?" And I came in, and the first thing that Joe came to me and said was, "I got the washing in because it was going to rain." And I went,
you did
"Oh
what?
my god! Oh my god! Oh, I was like, I was blown away. How sad is this? This
Yeah,
shows what my previous relationship was like." And I said, "Oh, thank you. Oh my god, Joe. Oh, Joe, you're so amazing. Oh, you brought the washing in. Oh," I was like, "Oh, this guy." And he did it. He did it all the time. And after about 3 times of me going, "Oh my god, you brought the washing in," he just said, "Can you stop?" And I went, "What?" He said, "Stop getting excited about me doing something that a normal partner who thinks of his partner should do."
should be doing exactly. Mm.
Don't praise me for something that any man who lives with his partner, who is a responsible partner, would do to help her out, or to just because it's not even your job, it's our job to do the
Yep,
washing. So
yep.
stop praising me for that. And I'm really sorry that you were married to someone that never brought the washing in.
Well, and I look at that. You're both living in the same household. You're both working. You're both bringing in income.
Yep.
You're both bringing food on the table.
Yeah.
There's none of this thing that one person. I mean, it depends on the relationship, but in today's society, a lot of the times both people are working.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes one person is, and if the other person is choosing to stay at home, they're choosing to stay at home because they want to raise the children, and that in itself is a job, and it should be
Massive job. Yeah.
respected as a job as well.
Yeah.
Because even though it may not be making any money, but it's helping you save money because you don't have to get babysitters in, you don't have to take them to childcare. The mother is there to make sure, or the father, whoever's choosing to stay at home, is actually making sure that those children are being raised the way that you want them to be raised. So they need to be respected for that role that they bring in.
Yeah.
That does not mean all of a sudden that they should be doing all of the housework as well,
Oh no. No.
on top of the looking after the kids, because
Mm.
a lot, doing the housework, any form of housework, or going off and doing the shopping, or doing everything to maintain the house is a
Life
lot of
admin.
work.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at it from the perspective of, there is two of us in this relationship. There were two of us in this household, like as in adults. We both share
Yeah.
all the responsibilities. It's not me more than you or you more than me. We share those responsibilities. And
Yeah.
that to me is a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
If
Exactly.
if it's actually not being shared, and it's more one person than the other, and one person's doing more and giving more, and the other person's just only doing about 30% of it, a conversation
Even.
needs to be had.
Yeah.
A conversation does need to be had,
Yeah.
because I
Absolutely.
assure you, you'll get to a point that you'll start resenting that
Of
person.
course.
You'll
Of
start
course.
resenting the relationship. You'll start resenting what
Mm.
you're doing in that role.
And that's actually a
And
really
that's
good
not
point.
healthy.
And because, you may get to the stage where, and resentment is an incredibly dangerous place to live, because resentment will erode your relationships faster than anything. And it happens insidiously when there are no discussions. Resentment is the biggest relationship killer, because, it will take away, if you're in a romantic relationship with someone, the first thing that goes when you're resenting them is all of those romantic feelings. They go straight out the door. You look at them and you just think, no, I'm not. Why would I snuggle up to you? You couldn't even be bothered to unstack the dishwasher.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing.
That's
Because
how we think.
and all your energy is going into maintaining, the household, or maintaining the relationship on some level, that, yeah, you're going to have no energy left over to
No,
help the relationship grow.
that's right. And with my first husband, I felt like I was married to a 14-year-old man child, who was petulant, and I was basically expected to be his mother. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, don't come near me. Mm.
And so I think that's the thing. That's why it's really important to do that self-respect, self-appreciation, set those healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And how would you go about, when we look at that, how do you go about setting a healthy boundary?
Well, traditionally, I haven't been very tactful or good at that. I'm a bit blunt. So what I've done traditionally is I've sat in
Bluntable.
that place, allowed the resentment to build for too long, and then I've just gone "Blah," and had a massive explosion, which is not a healthy way to handle it. I don't
But
recommend.
how common is that? How common
So
is that?
common,
It's
so
very
common, and
common.
that's how you completely ruin relationships permanently.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing I was going to say, that you brought up the resentment. A lot of people will avoid having the difficult, awkward. It's an ass clenching conversation. Let's admit it, isn't it? Your ass clenches with awkwardness when you're trying to have these conversations. We just have to accept that. Some
And
things
that's
are
what happens
difficult.
when you've left it too long, when you
That's
just
what happens when you've left
yeah,
it, or when you've realized, oh, actually, this person is taking advantage of me.
yeah.
So, I guess the hard thing is to have the awkward conversation, and that a lot of people just avoid that. They would rather suffer in silence until, and then rather than have that awkward conversation. Because the other thing we've got in our culture these days, um, and I think I mentioned this before, I've had a conversation recently. Somebody got some really poor service. They complained about the poor service, and I 100% agreed with them. I thought the service they had was terrible. Then the other person that had provided the service complained to me that the complainer was a complainer. Oh, they're just fucking whinging and, oh, they're causing all this fucking drama. They've got to carry on, haven't they? But actually, they'd lost sight of the fact that the person complaining had a genuine complaint and they had failed in the way they'd provided the service in the first instance. I didn't say anything along those lines, but I came away from that conversation thinking, wow, all they're focusing on is the person actually making a complaint and saying they're a pain in the ass. But that person paid for a service and they got shafted. So that was really interesting because in our culture in Australia, and I don't know, I guess this is across the world too, it's very much frowned upon to complain when you don't get what you're supposed to get.
Yeah, so it's about not rocking the boat. Yeah, don't rock the boat, just get on and
And I
you
think
know,
this
don't
I
complain
think
about
this bleeds into our relationships and it bleeds
it.
into everything, and we are guilty of this. Don't complain, you're a Karen, whatever. Well, actually, if you've got a valid complaint or you want to have a grown-up conversation, Eva, such and such happened. I've noticed this has been happening a lot recently. It makes me uncomfortable. Can we change the way we deal with this? You've got two choices, haven't you? You can either go, I mean, if you came to me and said that, I'd be like, oh my God, I feel terrible. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Yes, I will absolutely change what I've done. Or, if you want to have a crappy response, you can turn around and say, well, who do you think you are coming and having a whinge about that? Things have always been the way they are. Oh, you're so dramatic. Why do you have to cause a
Yeah,
problem?
yeah.
And that will
And
tell you the quality of the relationship, won't it?
well, it does. It absolutely does. And when you think about that, don't rock the boat. That's when we keep holding on to those things. That is why the resentment builds up, and that is why people then crack.
So,
And
yeah, you've either got the awkward conversation
yeah,
or the terrible burden on your mental health
yeah,
that will just keep weighing on you all the time until, I mean, a lot of people don't explode. A lot of people just internalize it because
yeah.
I always think that depression is anger that has
Turned
been pushed
inwards.
inwards.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
So
It's
then you become
anger turned
depressed.
inwards. Yeah,
It can affect your mental health. So I'm not saying go out there, which I'm probably guilty of. And when people really piss you off, just go, you know what, fuck off. I don't want to deal with you anymore because look, I'm guilty of that, becoming slightly more mature as I age. But I have done that out of sheer frustration in the past, definitely, because I've unfortunately been around some people who are just they take advantage and they're so overbearing that was probably the only thing that would make them leave me alone,
yeah,
which is really sad too. So I've changed going forwards. I had to change my radar and my antenna
yeah.
about
And
who I
you
was
will,
hanging
because
out with.
that's the other thing when you start respecting yourself more and appreciating yourself more and valuing
Yeah,
yourself more,
it's all
is
part of that
you
journey.
will be, a bit choosier as who you choose as friends or as a
Yeah,
partner.
yeah,
Um, you'll go into the relationship with your eyes wide open as
yeah.
opposed to going in going, oh, I just want a relationship. I just want a relationship. I just want to be liked.
Mm,
And because I just want to be liked, I'm just going to do all the things so they like me and they appreciate me and they value me.
yeah,
When
yeah.
it's got to start with you first.
Well, that's the wonderful irony of the mirror work of
yes,
the blueprint is that when you become a person who turns inwards and you look at your own stuff and you become comfortable with yourself, you get friendly with your own inner landscape, you are your own best friend.
mm,
So that hunger for friendship, that hunger for external validation reduces and you go into relationships differently. So you meet a new person and you don't go, oh, I hope they like me. I'd like to be their friend. You sit back and go, oh, let's get their measure.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
are
And you
you my
also look at
kind of
it
person?
going, it may just be a relationship that's once off, that you just have a nice conversation, or it could be one that does build into a very beautiful relationship, but you allow it to unfold the way it needs to unfold, as
Yeah.
opposed to making it happen or forcing it to happen because you're
Yes.
giving too much and
Yep.
you're not setting your boundaries because you want to be liked.
Yep.
It's those types of things that you are, and that to me is you are forcing a relationship,
Yes.
making it very one-sided, that other person is getting everything that they want, but
Yeah.
you're getting nothing that you need from it. But
Yes.
you think you think you're getting well, they're valuing me and they're liking me because I'm giving them so much, but in actual
Yep.
fact, it's quite opposite. And for some people I know, like I had a very close friend who used to become the shadow of the person she was
Oh,
going out with. She would totally lose herself in
that's
them.
so common.
It's
Yeah.
very common. And what would always end up happening, it'd be all wonderful and blossoming
Mm,
for the first few years, and then
mhm.
it would start to deteriorate. And it usually wasn't her that was making it deteriorate. She would still be their shadow. She would still be doing all the things that they wanted her to do.
Yeah,
But they got to a point that they lost respect for her.
they've had enough. Yeah. Yeah,
And
they've
then
had
they'd
enough.
go, I'm not getting anything out of this person. They're not there. Because what do you want in a relationship? You also want to be challenged sometimes. You want to be mentally challenged. You want to be emotionally challenged.
Oh,
You want to
yeah.
grow and evolve together. But
Yeah.
when one person is just totally being your shadow,
Mm.
where's the growth happening with that
Oh, no, I
person?
couldn't stand that. You don't wanna be with someone who's a pushover. There's
No.
no You want someone who will also challenge you, and I think if you're in a relationship where you're looking for somebody who's a pushover, that you don't want anything to ever challenge you, I think you need to take a bit of a look at yourself.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
there's nothing more fun than your partner turning around going, "I think that's a load of rubbish, and I'm gonna debate you on that." And I go, "Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's have
Let's
a
have a
debate.
conversation. Exactly.
Let's have a debate about it.
And
Now put your points to me."
Yeah, and that's the same thing. So if you're setting boundaries, yes, it's obviously a lot easier to set boundaries earlier on in a relationship than it is later on.
Yeah.
But if you're already in a relationship where you have been the giver and some boundaries need to be set, well, then you're going to have to start setting them. And you don't have to set them all at once.
No.
It's had that conversation with your
Yeah.
partner or with the friend and let them know to kind of say, look, I'm going to start pulling back a bit, or I expect you to, do more of the chores or
Yeah.
whatever the case is, but just start small. And
Or
or if
or
it's with
do
a friend
nothing.
that expects to see you all the time, and expects
Yes.
you to drop stuff,
Mm.
whenever they call you or what have you, is you need to
Mm.
say to them, "Look, I need to
I'm
take
busy.
time out for myself and do things. How
Yep.
about we just catch up once a week as opposed to you calling me every
Yeah.
single day or once a fortnight? Let's work on that and then we'll build on it." And if they get upset
Mm.
with that, well, then that's their baggage
That's right.
because they're also looking to you for validation through that friendship and not giving
Mm.
you the
It's
respect
not
or
your
the
job.
time freedom to do what you need to do.
No,
So
no, no. It's not your
I
job
think setting
to do it.
boundaries are really, really important, and it will show to you if that relationship is going to be serious. And if you are going into a relationship in the early stages, like I know for me, one of the things I say to friends, even friends that, perhaps if I've met in the workplace and we see each other all the time in the workplace because, you're working with each other,
Yeah.
but then one of us moves on. One of the things I always say to them, whether it's me moving on or them moving on, is look, don't expect me to be in your pocket every day like we have been at work because we see each other all the time at
Yeah.
work. Because
Absolutely.
I look at them and I say, I'm actually someone who respects my free time. And
Mm.
even though I love you and I love catching up with you, I won't be on the phone to you all the time. I won't be
No.
calling you every single day or stuff like that. We may end up catching up once a month. And I said that with them and they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. No problems. Easy done.
Got
I
my life.
understand.
I got my
And
life. Yep.
I've had that conversation a few times with people because
It's
I don't
interesting.
want them to expect that because we were in each other's pockets in work, that we're going to be in each other's pockets outside of
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't handle relationships like that. I need time to, yeah, be by myself and recharge my batteries and spend time alone. And I
Yeah.
find as I get older, I cherish my alone time. And it's interesting when I used to work in sort of more coaching type spaces in different roles. I used to talk a lot to, well, especially when I work with offenders, a lot of domestic violence offenders and offenders in really chaotic and distressing, upsetting relationships that would cause them to offend, because they couldn't manage this sort of these boundaries. They could some of them just were so enmeshed. It was just incredible. So I always used to talk to them about the footy goalposts because I tried to make it something that's really easy that everyone can understand. So you as an individual need to be a footy goalpost before you're ready for a relationship. And what that means is that so you need to be the footy goalposts which look like an H, on the top. But what you don't see is underground the great big concrete pylons that firmly cement those posts into the ground because
Yeah.
they can get knocked over by the wind, and they go down really really far and they're very thick. And I used to draw a diagram of that, and I'd say, if you're a footy goalpost, what are the pylons made of? And the ideal relationship is if you drew it in a diagram, two footy goalposts with one bar between them. And that's the relationship. And if that bar were to break, the footy goalpost would be sad, but they would
Yeah.
still remain upright.
Yeah.
What is a really unhealthy relationship is the ones where people don't have any of those concrete pylons. And what are those made of? They're made of your identity, your relationship with yourself, your hobbies, your career, anything that you do that is all about you, that you've invested in yourself, your qualifications, your social things, your interests in music, in pottery, or the sports that you play, whatever it is that makes up your identity, because we are layered individuals. and
We are.
and also your boundaries, your
Yes.
boundaries. And you will attract the relationships that your boundaries project, I guess.
Correct. And
Mm.
it's funny because some of the people that, like some of my coachees, for instance, my clients that I have coached on setting boundaries,
Mm.
um, it's fascinating seeing the results that they've had once they've started to set boundaries.
Ah,
One of the things that starts to happen is they really start to like themselves again.
yes.
Because they're kind of going, wow, I'm actually starting to really see how much I wasn't actually validating myself,
Yep.
and I wasn't giving myself the time that I needed for me.
Mm.
It's like
Mm.
that me time. There was never any me time. It's always
Mm.
everybody else. And they said, and since having me time, I feel more relaxed because they get so stressed because they're always trying to please other people,
Oh my
and they're
god, it just
constantly
never
thinking
ends.
about pleasing other people, so this stress comes up and they've got no inner calmness happening,
Mm.
and they the slightest thing can upset them, and so they
Yeah.
start to find that when they start to set the boundaries and they give themselves the time that they need for themselves as well,
Mm.
that all of a sudden they start to appreciate themselves more, which
Yeah.
means the way that they're interacting in the relationships are better because they're
Yeah.
not coming from a place of stress.
Yeah.
They're coming from a place of calmness and centeredness and a feeling of self-respect. So their conversations end up being very different. So what they've found
Yeah.
that even though initially that conversation of setting the boundary could be difficult, once they've actually done it, they've actually found the relationship has improved.
Yes, that
And
happens
the
a
other
lot too.
person has, in fact,
Mm.
appreciates them and respects them more, and they themselves are more happier and centered within themselves.
Do you think sometimes we catastrophize those conversations too much,
Oh,
so
yeah,
we
we'd make
become
them into a big
afraid?
story. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So we go, "Oh my god, we're gonna offend them, we're gonna upset them, they're not
yeah,
gonna like us anymore, we're gonna lose that friend, or we're gonna, ostracize ourselves from that family member." But I guess the way that I always look at it is, hopefully that person will be willing to listen, or they may initially feel a bit hurt, or may initially feel a little bit offended. But if they go away and
or they may be
process that.
excited for you.
Yeah, yeah. Or they may go, "Oh, wow, I'm really pleased that you've said that. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Yes, exactly. And I do
yep,
respect you more for that." And
yep,
that's how relationships grow. Because I think the other thing
yes.
is the whole don't rock the boat, don't say anything. That's how we end up in stagnant relationships. And relationships are meant to challenge us.
They are. You're meant to
They
grow,
help
you're
us
meant to
grow.
evolve
Yeah,
together, and if you're
yeah,
not growing and evolving together, that means that relationship has had its time and it needs to move on, and I think that's the other interesting thing for the people that I have coached through setting boundaries as well,
yeah.
is those relationships that they was giving a lot to, and then they when they do start to, as I said, set those boundaries and start validating themselves a bit more and valuing themselves more,
Mm,
they are able to then look at the relationships that are actually unhealthy
yeah.
and go, I actually need to let that relationship go because it has had its time.
And you do let
And
it go. You do,
yeah,
because suddenly something inside you just goes, "Yep, I release it." And
yeah,
then you just let it go.
exactly. And you go, and you may have to have a conversation with that person to kind of say, I think I still like you. I still, love you as a friend or what have you.
Yep.
But I just don't feel that I need to hang with you that often. And they may be a little bit hurt by that, but I think they'll understand as well. And as time goes on, you'll start to feel better again because you haven't got that toxic relationship going on
Yeah.
and you've let it
Not
go.
the burden of it is
Yeah, you're
gone
not
from your
trying to
life.
force it to keep alive when it's actually had its time, and
Yeah,
you've just got to let it go. And
yeah.
especially if the whole reason for that relationship was to teach you to set boundaries.
Well, that's the other thing, interestingly, when you've got poor boundaries, I find oftentimes, and I know for myself in the past when I had poor boundaries, I was one of these people that could not go. I would go, we've got to do something. I've got to do something. I've got to be fixing this, or I've got to, it's I would always not even think about it, just assume it was my job to
Yeah, to
resolve
fix it.
this matter.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful things that I had to learn to do was to just stop, just do nothing. Do you know how hard it was for me to learn to do nothing? I had to just go, okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm not reacting. I'm doing nothing. I'm just going to let this thing play out. Such a difficult thing for high empathetic people to do. And I learned how to do that. And so in those instances, and Joe, my husband, when we first got together, he wasn't real good with boundaries. And he realized that he used to go and travel and visit people and they would never call him and they would never reciprocate. So I said, if you stop feeding that relationship, what happens? Just
Yeah.
stop. Don't do
Does
anything.
exactly. Does that relationship stop because you stop
Falls
feeding?
away. Just
Yeah.
falls away. And
Yeah.
suddenly 5 years have gone by and you haven't heard from that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing. So if you are the one constantly contacting the person,
Yep.
and it's a very one-sided relationship, and you find
Yeah.
that as soon as you stop that,
Yep.
it just
You
drifts
put the
drifts
energy in.
away, and there's nothing
Yeah.
else. Well, then that says something about that relationship
Well
as
and
well.
truly done. Well and
Yeah.
truly done. Yeah, yeah. Or the only reason they're coming to visit you is because you've offered them something.
Yeah.
That's another
Like
thing
they
too.
want something in return.
Yeah.
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 But
Absolutely.
yeah, so setting boundaries sounds terrifying to a lot of people. A lot of people find it very worrisome and very awkward, but the reality is that the payoff from setting boundaries is actually
Oh, it's
huge.
huge. Yeah, it's
Because
quite
even
big.
if you do lose that person, nature abhors a vacuum and it makes space for another person to come into your life who may have been waiting in the wings that would be
Yeah,
much
a
better
better
for you.
relationship. Yeah.
Mm,
A relationship that will actually respect and appreciate the boundaries that you set, and they will also have their own boundaries that
yeah,
they've set, and you will know what each other's boundaries are.
yeah. And
Yeah,
that's how you level up.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's a nice note to finish on, that one.
Yes.
That's good.
I'm
Yeah.
going snow chasing today. That's why I'm not bothering. I'm just
Snow
wrapping up in the
chasing.
cold. Yep.
Ooh,
I'm going out there in my beanie. We're going to drive up. I'm in Tassie and snow down to 300 meters today. So we're just going to nip up
lovely.
to this place where there's a beautiful waterfall and it's just going to be all snow, was the other day, and we'll play around in that and then go and get some lunch at the pub.
That sounds
Sounds like
fabulous.
what a great day.
That sounds great. Well, enjoy your snow day.
Yes,
And
thank you.
to our audience, look, if something has stood out for you in today's episode, we would love to hear from you. Please provide any answers in the comments below or questions that you have for us that you even, if you've got questions that you would like us to answer for you.
Mm,
Join our podcast community on Facebook as well, the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast,
yeah,
and subscribe. Please subscribe. We
yeah,
would actually love to have you as part of our broader community because the more lives we can touch, the better this planet will actually be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So remember to think beautifully and live brilliantly. Cheers.
Bye, guys.
We'd like to say a huge thank you to our incredible audience for your continued support. Our mission is to ignite your spark, empowering you to be a beacon of light for others. We'd love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions that you would like answered in future episodes or just want to share some insights, connect with us on our Facebook community page. If you're looking for additional resources, go to our website. You'll find the link below. And remember, the absolute best way to help us grow is to share this episode with your friends and family and to subscribe to the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast. So until next time, think beautifully and live brilliantly.